Okay, let me walk you through LangSmith. LangSmith is really important, I think, for the workflow of an AI engineer or a prompt engineer, just because it gives you a very easy, simple way to trace what's happening with not just prompts, but also chains and then agents. It becomes increasingly important when there's lots of different calls going on. And I think that's why LangChain focused on this as their first kind of major project. This little tutorial is just a shortened version of the tutorial on their website, which I'll link to, but in particular, the things to note are that in order to get it running, you just need to use LangChain. Like, you don't need really anything else. And there are a few different things you need to just add as environment variables. So you need this LangChain endpoint, which sends whenever the tracing happens within LangChain, it sends this to LangSmith. And then there's also a project name you can give it. In this case, I've just put in a unique ID. And then also you just need to set tracing v2 and equals to true. That's all you need to get set up. And everything else, whenever you run anything in LangChain, it's going to trace, which is really helpful. You also need to set up your API key, which you get from within LangSmith. And then for this tutorial, the agent uses OpenAI. It also uses SERP API to do searching. So I've set this up in an environment variable. I'm not going to show you my AI API keys, but that's what the .env file would look like. And then I'm basically just loading .env with this package, but equally you could just type it in here if you want. So I'm just going to run that, and then all you have to do is from LangSmith import client and set up client if you want to interact with it, but you don't actually need this for this demo specifically. The client is useful if you want to pull the results back or if you want to set up a data set. I'll show you what that means. Okay, everything else is just LangChain code, right? So we're just setting up the chat OpenAI API. We've got the tools and we're setting up an agent and we're giving it the LLM math and the SERP API tools. So it can use a calculator and it can search the web. And this is a zero-shot React agent. So I'm just going to run that. And if you guys haven't done this before, what's really interesting about this code, there's two different things. So one is that you have an agent out of the box that will do the reason and act framework. So it's going to, when you give it a task, like how many people live in Canada, it's going to first check whether it needs to use one of these tools, and then it's going to use it. And then using the output, then it's going to check again, what does it need to do? What we want for this to do is to search for the population of Canada and then give you that result. And then there's things like this, like who is Dua Lipa's boyfriend? What is his age raised to the 0.3 power? So it would need to search the web to find Dua Lipa's boyfriend. It needs to use the calculator to do the raising to the power, because LLMs are famously bad at math. That's really useful. The other thing that's interesting about this code is it's using asyncio. So this is a good, simple example of how you run multiple prompts all at once. And this is just a list of prompts that it's going to run through and then gather the result at the end. This is going to be so much faster, actually, than running them one by one. So if you're testing a bunch of stuff, I really recommend you look into async. So we're just going to run this, and you see it took 0.3 seconds, super fast. And that's with the basic 3.5, but even for GPT-4, this would run pretty fast. And then you just want to wait for all traces, not necessarily really for this, but this is just to make sure that everything was finished with this asyncio call. All right, that's run, and now we get into LangSmith. And we can take a look, and here we go. This tracing walkthrough has been run again. And actually, just before I get in this, these are the different projects that we have. And you can see when it was run, what the latency was in particular, very useful and interesting. And then how many times it was run and how many tokens you used. So I've had some pretty big tests where I've used hundreds of thousands of tokens, which takes a long time and costs a lot of money. And the latency was super bad because I was using GPT-4. It's really useful for me to be able to go back and pick this out and see what the difference is. When you click into the project, it has a really good interface actually for searching into different things. You could, for example, show me are there any calls that had used more than a certain number of tokens or whatever. You can also search for any errors that you might have. And actually, in this case, there's an error on everything, and that's because this API key is deprecated. Right? You can identify issues like this. So I'm going to go into OpenAI, I'm going to put in a new API key, and then we're going to run again. And so you can see this is the type of framework that you're doing. I'm going to delete this afterwards, but if I go up here and I change my OpenAI key to this, I'm going to delete this one afterwards so you guys don't rinse me of tokens. And then I'm going to run this again and then run this again. Then we can go back iteratively change anything that we find, any other issues we find with the prompt. And that's what this is doing, which is super useful, I think. So this is taking 15 seconds. And if we go into LangSmith, we go back to the projects, you see we've got this new run here, and now it's all green. So that's really cool. We just identified a problem and we saw an error and we can drill into it. Here we had a problem and it's saying value error, unknown format. I'm sorry, I can't provide an answer to that question. So this is really interesting because we saw that 1 in 10 times it's going to say, no, I don't know how to do this. So that's really interesting. You can flag that and say, okay, there's an issue here that this happens fairly often. Then for the ones where it did work, like you can see what the latency was, you can see how many tokens you used, you can also just see what it did, right? What did it do? So the input was, what is this? And then output is this. So how did it get there? So first, the LLM chain said, here's the question that I have. And the output was, I need to perform a division calculation. And I'm going to take the action of calculator, and then I'm going to use this for the calculator. Then it called the tool, and the calculator gave it this answer, and then it fed this back in, and it said, here's my observation, here's what I decided to do, and then that was the input, and then that was the output, and then it says, now I know the final answer is this. The actual output ended up being correct. So you can actually step through this code, and this is so important when you have agents because they go off the rails all the time, and being able to see this is super useful. I'm going to click into this one just so you see who's Kendall Jenner's boyfriend, and it looks like it's got the right answer. So we're going to dig in. First, it says I need to find out who his boyfriend is, so I'm going to search for Kendall Jenner's boyfriend. The result is that we got this response. And then it doesn't give the actual current boyfriend. I need to search again. Now it's saying current boyfriend. It's adapted its search. And then it's coming back and it's getting this answer that it was player Devin Brooker. And then now it knows the boyfriend, so it's going to keep going through. And now I know the boyfriend, now I can use the calculator. So this is a really cool way to see what agents are actually doing. And you can see that how long it took and how many calls as well, how many tokens. So really useful to be able to do this. You can also dig into what were the individual calls, what specifically did the prompt say, and look at this is the actual data here that you got from this, and this is how it decided between what to do with that data. So you can really drill into anything you need, and you can see how many tokens were used in each. That is, I mean, in itself incredibly useful, but you can also take it from here and set up things like data sets. You can do evaluations. Here's like an evaluation framework. You're rating it based on correctness or helpfulness, and then you can actually export this and start using it for fine tuning as well. So it's a whole workflow, and it's super useful. Highly recommend you you try it. It is, I think, still in beta, so you might need to talk to someone at LangSmith or LangChain to get access, like I did. But get on this early because I think evaluation is continually coming up as the number one problem that people have when they're using AI in production. Hopefully you guys can get in early.